How's everybody doing? So I'm going to paint these barriers, but before I do, I want to point out some of the brushes that I use, the paints, and just show you how I always set up normally. Pretty much, basically, I do this when I switch gears to paint, like build, paint. Like sometimes when I'm building on the bench and I'm doing a project that has a sort of a dynamic progress, meaning some parts I got to paint as I build or whatever, then I don't normally do this. But when I finish a project and then I want to do isolated subjects, I clear the bench, clean up a bit, and lay down paper. Like maybe it's OCD, everybody has their own style, but I like to do it because it helps to cleanse my mind from all distractions, and then I can focus in on the task at hand or whatever the subject is. And in this case, this is the best part for me. Like it's the painting part, like sitting down in the evening. This is evening now, it's about 6 o'clock, and I love this period of time when I can take some subjects I've built and I stack them up and then I line them up and then I just start painting. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to use here. And this is a good subject matter to show it because it doesn't take up too much space. And these are like, this is the same tools or brushes that I use for most projects when I paint, like model parts, or in this case these jersey barriers. But so you can see, like I do use sponges, not that often, but I probably will with these. Okay, so these are just clips with sponges, just chunks of sponges, wherever you can find. It doesn't have to be one particular sponge. It's subjected to each person, but I like them for dabbing when I'm doing washes and staining. They can create a certain effect that's kind of cool. So they're just different grain or textures on those sponges. And then these are the brushes that I really like. Like these are probably my 4 favorite brushes that I use quite a bit of, mostly with watercolor or acrylic, right? And when I say watercolor, I just mean when I'm using as a solvent water, whether it be watercolor or acrylic paints, okay? And these are not expensive brushes. Like these are actually like on the scale of 1 to 10 for like price. Like these are like a 6. Okay, like they're really not that expensive. They're not the cheapest brushes, but they're still a kind of a budget brush. Because when you're painting with acrylic, you always get your brush in water a lot, and oftentimes you leave your brush soaking while you're painting, and eventually the water gets into the ferrule here, and it gets in behind the paint on the wooden handle, and they pop, they shed the paint. They usually shed quite quickly, but when they do, they just become raw wood, and then the ferrule becomes loose. But if the bristles are still good, you can just CA with medium C, just pull it off if it's loose and then re-glue it back on. You can get a long life. Like brushes are funny, like some brushes, like you can buy like 5 of these, let's say, and use them back and forth, and maybe 2 will hold their own way better than the other 3. It's weird. Like I have my favorite brushes, like this brush here is a favorite of mine. It's a number 8 filbert, and I really like this brush. I don't know, I guess it's just the way it's designed or something. It's thick and it has a rounded end. It wicks up paint and water good, which I like. And yeah, so that's a nice little brush. And then this one here is a number 6 synthetic, round it's called, right? Okay. And they're different colors, but they don't really matter. But there's probably too many brushes out there. You know what I mean? Too many choices. And then this one's a grainer. I've used these before. I use them for oil, really thin oil sometimes, or I'll use them for acrylics for just pulling the water or the stain a certain way. So, and then once in a while, you get a bit of paint for cleaning. I used to clean in water and then clean them with soap at the end of the day. But sometimes I'll just sit them in a little, you know, like a little hors d'oeuvre, like a stainless hors d'oeuvre tray with a bit of isopropyl alcohol, and let them soak for an hour or 2. Just to get the paint out of the ferrule, like deep in, like it builds up inside of there, and it can deform the brush a bit, and it gets hard in there. So if you're just using acrylics, the isopropyl alcohol will dissolve that away, and then you can restore your brush back again. I like using Microsol. Microsol works good to soak it in Microsol after you've cleaned them with isopropyl alcohol, and it brings the shape back That stuff's magical, for some stuff. It's not only good for settling decals down, but it's good for bringing your brushes and restoring them back to shape as well. Just dip them in and then just wick them like that. But yeah, so that's what I basically set up with for acrylics. And then I have my water jar. And this water jar, I've been keeping this. This is really good. You can see how old it's getting. This is from the beginning of River Road. I'm sort of attached to it now, and I clean it every day, and that's what I use to clean my brushes, like when I acrylic paint. So this I use as a wetting aid. You can use dish soap, right? A couple drops of dish soap in your water. Or if you're going to use just water like this, like in your chip, put a few drops, like 5 or 6 drops in here. This has a little tiny bit of IPA, like a couple drops of IPA with regular water as well. This just helps to settle the surface tension a little bit better when you put IPA in water. It takes away the surface tension on plastic or paint for that matter. Okay. And then there's these 6 colors I can use for concrete. Okay, so these are colors I use all the time. Like these 6 colors, I think I've said this before. There's a photo. I'll talk about that just in closing. But so there's this USAAF light gray that you know I like, right? I use a lot of that. And then there's aged white. And this looks kind of pinkish sometimes. When you put it on, it doesn't look pink. It's really cool. It looks like it makes the white look scale. And then there's cement gray. This is all model air, so just because it says air on it, you don't have to use it in your airbrush. They have a neat range of colors there. Even though I mix my own colors, I still like little eyedropper, quick on the fly colors. This is concrete, so cement and concrete washes work kind of good together. And then, of course, there's the good old burnt umber, which I really like. And then dark sea gray. So these 6 are what I'm going to use to paint these Jersey barriers with, okay? And I'm going to do them subsequently. And I won't do them all wet subsequently, like wet, 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 wet. I'll work wet on wet, like wet them down and put a couple colors on, and then let the Jersey barriers dry for, I don't know, 15 minutes or so, or 10 minutes. I'm going to let all the residue just settle on the tape. Like these are stuck on tape, see? That's masking tape. And I just tape the back on a stick. This piece of 3/4 masking tape it on the back, like I stretch it around, right? It's like a stretcher bar. All right, see? And then I let the paint settle on here and the residue and let it leach up the edge, and it ends up looking like part of the weathering. Whatever those colors might be, I let them just have their way, and you always get like really cool effects that way. It's like welcoming mistakes. Like I find that the longer you paint, like the more you're at it in this game, you almost welcome mistakes and anomalies, because they like 9 times out of 10 work in your favor. And then there's a photo, right, for like inspiration. I have a few. So there's this one and then this one here. Okay, but I really like this one because some of these Jersey barriers have paint on them and they got funny staining, and they really have a history, these ones. These were the main ones that inspired me to do some little details on these that I obviously showed earlier. You can see the different variations of color there. There's some gray and then white and then rust, which is why I added the metal parts on some of them, because I just think rust in contrast to light cement gray is really a nice look. Okay, so this is how I set up for almost everything I paint in this like type of setting. It just makes for a welcoming place to come where you can relax and approach the whole experience in a calm way, okay? So I'll zoom in a little bit and show you some of the process, and then we'll get these Jersey barriers painted up, and then we'll get them on the layout, okay? Things are going to get messy real fast. I'm going to start with this USAAF light gray. I usually like to go light to dark in this case. And then I'm going to wet these down. I like to pre-wet. That way, sorry if I go off camera there because it's a long stick, but I'll keep the part that I paint in camera. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my tray here and make sure that I have water. There's water around this rim. These are yogurt lids for those of you that are maybe new to the channel. I like using these yogurt lids. I put the paint on top here. And because I only use little bits of paint and I use it up or whatever and then close off for a paint session, I don't need a sponge or wax paper. I know people do that and that's good, but mostly for maybe figurine painting or longer projects or whatever. But here, so I can pull water from here up onto here or whatever. So, because like I'm going to lay paint on, let's say I'll just lay it on like that. There's lots of water. And I'm just going to let the paint do what it wants. But I want it to be thin though, okay? So we're going to be putting like about 5 layers on this. And you want them to be thin. Otherwise you just end up with a lot of, heavy paint. And you lose the effect, right? Like you don't want to make it like muddy. But you want hints of each color that create different stains, random stains, that you really don't need to be in control of, actually. You want to let the water do that. In fact, like when you do it this way, I don't want to dump paint in my coffee out of view there. The paint will be dripping into my coffee mug. That's where that saying comes where, artists eat paint, right? It's always by accident. They don't do it deliberately. It's just that they're always at their paint desk and they eat and drink there. And so paint tends to migrate into things if you're not careful. So I'm just laying on some of this light gray, we'll call it. And even if it doesn't show that much, that's good. Because it does, and it will. Because when you add other colors to it, over top of it, it causes reactions or it changes the tone of the stain in a way that you wouldn't be able to manipulate on an individual basis. So this method is actually quite easy to do. It's like, see the top here? So I'm basically just, now that I put those stains on, I'm just going to lay in a little bit heavier here, like on top, because I know there'll always be light on the tops of these. All right, you can see how I'm just sort of having fun, right? Kind of a Bob Ross moment, like I used to really like watching him because you could tell he was so experienced and been painting so long, and he just had so much fun because he was familiar with the paint, right? And it's the same with painting models as well. If you just let go a bit and not take it too seriously. I mean, how many models do we have, or how many models do people have? We have lots of subjects we can paint and have fun with, right? Okay, so I'm just going to leave this now. I'm going to let this first layer dry, okay? And then we're going to come back and have a look at that. And I'm going to paint the other one just like this off camera, and then we'll come back for the next coat. Okay, another quick check on the pick, on the reference. Now, I forgot to mention what I base coated these Jersey Bears. I used this XF19 Sky Gray. I use JN Gray and Sky Gray quite a bit as a kind of a primer or a base coat. It's really the same thing, but the two colors vary. But most of, to me, I've mentioned before, like their XF is like very much like a primer. It has very similar properties anyway. So I just use it as such. Now I airbrush these that color. Now if you don't have an airbrush, you can still, you don't have to use, to me, you can just use a base gray, but just put it on thin and don't worry if the plastic shows through on your first coat, because by the time you lay all these layers on, there won't be any plastic showing anymore. So, all right, I just use the airbrush because I can throw on thin coats, nice and crisp, and I can change it up a bit and add another variation, pre-paint variation, so to speak. So these are dry now, and I don't know if you can see them really, but they do, like that light gray, that very light gray that I used is on there. There's some neat kind of staining. I kind of dabbed on a little bit off camera too, but made sure there was water. Like, you don't want a hard edge, right? So if you're getting a hard edge, just put more water on it to soften it, and then chase it with paint again, just so the paint blends, or sorry, the water blends the paint. And even if you get little tide marks, you sort of want those in this particular case anyway. So, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to spritz this just off camera for a second, because I don't want to wet my table here. And we're going to put this next color, which is 71.045 cement gray. This is the second filter, okay? Remember how I talked about washes? Washes, filters, glazes are not by definition exactly the same, but they're general terms for the same thing. They're thin coats, thin layers. So if you hear me use filters or wash, I'm referring to the same thing. Glaze is when you add gloss coat to it, and you're building up layers with a gloss coat, paint layer, gloss coat, paint layer. That's a bit more technical, but if you hear me say things like stain, wash, or filter, I mean the same thing. In this case, wet on wet. And then wet on wet, for those that aren't aware, is where you wet the model, the whole model down, or that large surface that you're working on, and so that it's always damp when you're applying acrylic paint to it, because it just helps the paint flow better. You can keep it thin, and you're building up those filters, right? And you're altering the tone of the color in a way that's really hard to reproduce any other way. So once again, this is another stain, and it's a shade that you know, is almost undiscernible, probably more so on camera, but it isn't live, and as it determines the final color of the model in this case. We'll just call these models, I guess. This cement gray has a really unique, I can't really explain it. Like, I don't know what they put in. It must be their patent, Vallejo, like some of these colors. They just, when they start to dry, they look really cool. That's already looking cool. I don't know if I want to touch that too much, because you don't want them all to be the same, right? You know what I mean? Like, you want to maybe skip a few. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave that. That looks pretty good. I always say that, don't I? And then but you know, it's a feel thing. Just go as you feel. But remember, less is oftentimes better. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to do the same with this other one now, and then let them dry, and we'll look at them again. Okay, so step 3, or layer 3, so you can see some of just the photos, some of the variations here for inspiration, different colors. There's a little bit of rust too. I'll get to that pretty quick here, but that's coming up shortly. And I haven't used any of the aged white yet. The aged white's going to be last, going to sponge on some like this. This might have had some paint on it or something. But just to, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's a color that you want to add visual texture and character. See, this one here is neat, with the dark gray and then what might be paint, probably, I think. And then you can see where the metal works are, there's rust. So now the third layer is this concrete. This is when it starts to really look cool. When you start adding this kind of color onto the two that we've already applied, right? So remember how we laid on the light gray first, which, you know, doesn't really look significant at first, and neither does this, the cement gray, but I'll show you up close here. I'll show you some of the things that you can notice. So you can see there's little variations that goes into the engraving there. Like, some got on the top randomly, which is cool, right? You don't want to make them all the same. You leave stuff like that, right? Because that's all going to play really nicely later. And then you can see, like this one here, see the different anomalies building up. That one there, like the engraving and all the distressing that I did with the Dremel tools is starting to come into play too. Look at that one. See that? And then there's like, here's one. I don't know where that came from, that little white gray, but it just came through, which is nice. And then there's one on the top there, see? So I'm going to wet these down again quick, and then we're going to lay on this concrete color, and that's when you're going to start to see a lot of that engraving coming into play, okay? So we're going to grab some of this with a brush, and this is all wet now, and we're just going to start stabbing some of it on. Try not to get ahead of yourself too late. Don't let it dry like that, okay? You don't want to let that dry like that, and I'll show you why. Now that you've stabbed it on there because it's wet, grab some water, like wet your brush, and just attack it with water. To knock down that opaque look so it turns into a stain, see? See that? See how the back there, you want to check the back side. You want to get away from that, just chase it with water and move it around some more. Leave a little parts of it behind too if you want. Like, don't spread it all evenly, just get into a feel with it so it turns into a stain. Like, that's pretty cool right there. Okay? So have fun doing this, and then as you put on the final layers, you're going to see how cool it's going to look. And some of these have yellow striping on them. I pre-painted yellow and put tape over. I didn't tell you about. So we'll peel those off later. But see how like that engraving, the chipping and stuff, and it goes into those areas? That's what you want. You want to encourage that, okay? Where the corrosion on the cement is. And that'll really come into play when you put the dark sea gray on at the end. And then a little bit of rust on some of them, okay? Okay, so I want to show you the grainer brush before we go to the dark sea gray. So you can see, I'll take this, or these two Jersey barriers here. And what I'll do is I'll just put on a little bit of this concrete color, just on the top edge like this. Okay, and I'll take this grainer brush. See that, like when you wet this brush, see what it does? Cool, eh? Then what you do is you take that cement from the top, you just pull it down like that. And, you know, don't be hard on yourself if things aren't working out right away, everything's going muddy or it's not distinct. Like, just keep at it, right? And it'll start to come, right? And everyone's going to be different. That's what art is. Art is not a science. You can try to, you know, I could do 2 more lots of these and not one of them is going to be the same, even though I do the same thing over and over again. So that's kind of cool, right? I'll do that one more time. We'll put some on here like this. Oh, it's getting too dry, so let's wet it. That's a bit too much. So just lots of water, right? See that, how I sponged all that off? Here, let's do these 2 on the end, and then we'll be done with these. Put it on there, put just an extra stab on there, throw that brush in the jar, and then I'm going to take this, and I'm just going to gently pull it down, just lightly, just like that. And you'll learn as the acrylic hardens up a little bit while it's still wet, how it works a bit differently, okay? So that's the grainer brush. Really nice brush. And just to be clear one more time, this is a 1/2 inch Princeton Select grainer. And I get these from Artist Opus Supply, or any art supply store. Michael's might have them too, okay? They come in different sizes. I have a 3/4 inch as well, and a 1/2 inch, all right? The grainer brush. Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit of this aged white now. Okay, 71.132 aged white. And I'm going to use this little chunky black sponge. And I'm not going to put any, like I'm not going to wet it now for this, because what I want to do is try to paint some of them like this. Like, see the paint here? See this here? So we got this color in here, and I don't want to put a any paint, or sorry, not Payne's gray, any of this dark sea gray. I'll just use for touching small engravings and things at the end, but I don't want to put a wash of that on because I don't want to darken these any more than what they already are. So I'm going to take this little sponge just straight into the paint. So a bit of aged white there. And if I run into any parts that I don't like, I can chase it with water, and I'll show you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to knock a lot of the paint off. You don't want too much paint on it, almost like a dry brush. And then you just want to work it. And if you're not liking where it's going, then just take your little spritzer and just shoot a little water on it. It'll soften it. Okay, see? This is the trick to all acrylic painting, is to have water. Have your revolver loaded at all times so that you can go quick on the draw, because you can catch things before they dry. See how that softened that? So let's do a few more here. So we'll dip that in there. Let's try this one here. Okay, so if that looks too painterly and I don't like it, take my spritzer. See that? Just soften it. And just keep doing that with, I mean, you got quite a few here to play around with, and you're going to get ones that maybe that you're not happy with, but that's okay, because they're going to be displayed in numbers, right? And try wetting it too first. Try pre-wetting it. Try just different applications. Oh, there, that looks pretty good. Maybe I'll just put a little bit on this one side like that. And then like that, okay? And as you do more and more, you'll just get more into it. And you'll be more random. That's the key, just to be random. And I'm not going to paint them all like that, but some will be like that. And you don't need to do all of them, because they look good when they're varied and mixed up. So these are reclaimed Jersey barriers by the railroad, and they're using them for one of their properties up in the Axton Steel parking area, okay? So I'm going to let that dry, and then I'll show you what I do with the wash and then the rust. Okay. Okay, so here's some dark sea gray, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet this grainer brush. Wet it, okay. And then I'm going to take some dark sea gray straight off the palette here. And just dip the tips in so they're dark, see? And then just do one stroke like this. And if it's too much paint, remember, just give it one of those and then try another one. That one turned out really good. Let's wet this down. It always works better when you wet it first. Okay, ready? Watch. concrete, right? It bleeds. Just keep working them. Just get into it. And if you're all alone, you get into that zone, you spend an hour or two, and you'll produce amazing results. Let's try this again. Oh, there, that's better. Okay. Not all of them, just the odd one. The grainer brush. Okay, so I'm going to use a little bit of this burnt umber I use for rust washes. A lot of times with 187 you can get away with just washes like this. Things change a little bit when you go into O scale, but the beauty of 187 is it's the perfect scale for this kind of painting, really. It's sort of impressionistic because, you know, you can't scrutinize it. I mean, you can on social media, like you can take a photo of this and blow the pixels wide up, you know, but who would do that? I mean, nobody views them that way. But when you look at them from a distance like this, like, for example, like when you add rust here, I'll just show you. So this is very thin wash, so I'm just going to, like, rather than focus on trying to paint the piece and not get paint on things, I let it get on things. I let it run. It's thin. Just let it run down the corners of things. And it looks fine, right? Because that's the way it bleeds anyway in the weather. You know what I mean? So here, I'll just show you here. Just a little bit of touch up. A little bit of rust goes a long ways. And this really makes these Jersey barriers look cool. It gives them character and history, right? And if you get a little bit of paint that gets away, you just come back with a bit of water and chase it and wash it away, okay? And then there's a couple here, like the rebar one right here. These little rods. See how you just flood it in? You don't have to worry about it, because that's the way they look anyway when they, you know, when the rust seeps out of the and the lime out of the concrete. You get lots of staining like that. Alrighty, so they're the Jersey barriers. Now we get to have fun placing them on the layout, right? Oh, one other thing I forgot to show you. Oh, wait a minute, wait a minute. Forgot to show you the striping. Where did the striping go? The striping is on the other stick. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay. So what I did was I shot some yellow with the airbrush. Just peel the tape off, see? A couple of them I did like that, about 6 that'll go up near the heavy equipment or whatever. And then I can also put a thin wash on that if I want to weather that down a bit, so. Okay. The Jersey barriers, fun stuff. Whoever thought you could have so much fun with Jersey barriers? Okay. Okay, how's everybody doing? So you can see these weathered Jersey barriers. They look really cool, eh? I knew I was going to put barriers in like a ways back, but I just had to get around to painting them. And I was just going to paint up half the pack, but I thought, I'll paint the whole pack, you know, might as well, right? And I really like them. They look really, really look cool. Unfortunately, I had to block off that logging road back there, because I'll tell you why. Like, you know, a lot of the kids, they come in here at night and they go up there and party, and I don't mind them doing that really, but the problem is they leave all their garbage and empties, and you know, they have a fire back there, and I went up there one morning and it was still smoldering, you know. So if they clean up their act that way, if they want to party, that's fine. But, you know, please clean up after yourself and don't leave fires burning overnight. And I might remove that barrier. It's easy enough with the forklift. But anyway, so Jersey barriers, right? Every model railroad needs Jersey barriers, right? Anyway, cheers, happy modeling, and I hope that you have a great day.